Good morning! You've already completed the theoretical part of the course, so now I invite you to the practical part. During the practical part, we'll go through the entire installation process of a ventilation and heat recovery system, using a construction site as an example. Let's start with something simple, going over the tools, okay? Which ones are needed, and which might come in handy during the installation process. Besides the proverbial screwdriver, you'll definitely need a few other tools, so you'll get to know these tools in this part of the course. We've discussed most of the components related to heat recovery ventilation. We have a prepared project with calculations, a list of materials, and most importantly, in the case of installing the heat recovery system yourself, a diagram of the installation with marked points showing where to install the appropriate supply or exhaust boxes. In order to, so to speak, find a place on the building, we definitely need to use certain tools or measuring devices, like a laser distance meter to measure the distance from a wall or partition, or simply use regular tape measures commonly used on construction sites. So, using precise measuring tools, we carefully mark the exact points where holes absolutely need to be made for the proper installation of the expansion boxes. That is, if these holes were not already made earlier during, for example, the construction of the ceilings, meaning during the building phase. So, the most important thing on a construction site is really the project, and now, according to this project, we have to carry out the installation. To do that, we need a certain minimum set of tools. I've already shown some, like the installation measuring tools, but now, moving on to each element, to properly install the plenum boxes in the floor, whether you're using standard expansion plugs, quick mount plugs, or others, you first have to drill a hole for the plug anyway. So, we need a hammer drill to properly drill holes in the concrete and install the plugs. Besides the boxes, it's also a good idea to secure the HDP or Peflex plastic conduits, whether it's the standard type, Spectra 1000, or others using cable ties, metal perforated tape, and we also use a screwdriver or drill along with plugs for this. We attach the plug to the tape and hold the conduits in the right place, or if we have the option, we can use a nail gun, right? So we fasten or secure the perforated tape, drive in the nail, and at that point, the job is done. The next item we need on the construction site is a knife for cutting Peflex pipes with diameters of 90, 75, or 50. Please remember that such a knife comes together with the distribution box, the one you have ordered or designed. According to the design, you should install the plenum boxes or distribution boxes using mounting brackets. In the case of a floor solution, that is, you drill holes with a hammer drill in the concrete, insert the wall plug sleeve, and properly secure the box so that it doesn't move. And we do the same thing with the distribution boxes. We also secure the hole with a wall plug to the base so that it doesn't shift, so it doesn't move, and so we can make the connection. Next, once we have both the plenum box and the distribution box installed, we can use the ducts, either the Peflex Spectra 1000 ducts or the Spectra standard ducts, by properly securing them in the couplings. However, to properly make the sealing edge, it's best to use knives dedicated for this purpose, specifically the Peflex knives. A short, quick, and precise cut. Now we have a properly prepared edge. We click it into the socket, into the coupling, and at this point, we have a tight connection for the duct. But what's important? Also, when using perforated tape, you should secure the ducts in the box at a distance of about 10 to 15 centimeters, so as to prevent the duct from shifting even accidentally, and to prevent it from being pulled out during installation. If we already have an expansion box, sometimes we need to use an extension for the box. If this extension is made significantly longer than, for example, the suspended ceiling, or if it noticeably sticks out from the concrete, The very best and most efficient tool to precisely cut this extension is a multifunctional oscillating tool, where the blade moves smoothly and rapidly sideways and will perfectly and cleanly cut the conduit, meaning the extension pipe, without any damage or harm to other surrounding elements. To properly install the system or to pass through a wall, for example for a cable or for an EPS Peflex EPS pipe, we make a larger and more substantial hole in the wall, of course using another specialized tool, such as a hole saw. Can we use a motor drill to make a hole in the external wall? But for sealing, we actually use insulating foam to avoid a thermal bridge, a thermal break in this spot, so the next tool or, really, material we need is foam plus a gun, or you can also use foams with their own applicator. However, when we're talking about installing the EPS Peflex system, we recommend that the sealing in the collar be done using acrylic for ventilation ducts. So again, another tool we need, besides the acrylic tube itself, is an acrylic gun to properly apply the acrylic around the perimeter to seal the connection. If we're using EPS ducts, to cut the duct to the right length, we can use either a styrofoam knife or a saw for plastic elements. Or an angle grinder, but with a special disc for cutting plastics. When we are installing with flexible, insulated ducts, it is important to ensure proper and secure connections for optimal performance and efficiency. Sometimes we need to cut them, so at this point we again need to cut through the wool, where we can use a wool knife. Or just regular scissors. But in a flexible duct, there's a very important wire that meticulously keeps the shape inside the duct. So we absolutely need, for example, robust steel shears to precisely cut that wire. Break time equals 0.5s/. Moving on to the installation of the heat recovery unit. If we're talking about wall mounting using a wall bracket, the most important thing is that the bracket is properly installed and level. So we also need, for example, a spirit level to properly level the mounting bracket, and again, we use the appropriate wall plug for the specific wall or surface, so that the bracket is installed correctly and securely. One of the last measuring instruments we need during the entire process of installation and commissioning of the heat recovery ventilation system is an anemometer, which is a device that measures air velocity or also the airflow in cubic meters per hour. It's best to use devices that, in addition to measuring in meters per second, also measure in cubic meters per hour. So in this case, we really don't have to think about it or do any conversions, just perform the measurement correctly. This way, we can be sure that we've completed our installation in accordance with the planned project. So if the project specifies that a particular room needs to have 30 or 50 cubic meters of air supply per hour, then really, the anemometer is the tool that will verify this for us. We've briefly discussed the 10 basic tools that are required or needed on a construction site. In addition to the tools we've shown here, you might also need other tools or devices, such as a hole saw for making openings in concrete partitions. With this hole saw, we can also make openings using a sufficiently large core bit for the intake and exhaust outlets. So, if someone has the drive, willingness, and the means to install a heat recovery ventilation system in their own home, you only need about this many tools. Thank you. I invite you to the next part of the course, where we will discuss making openings for air intakes, exhausts, or, for example, creating holes for running installations through walls or other partitions.